In this episode, we discuss implementing digital manufacturing solutions for orchestrating human-to-machine collaboration for smart manufacturing. My guest on this episode is Rafael Amaral. Rafael is the Chief Technology Officer for Tillit, a cloud-based digital operations platform. He leads a team of software engineers in developing alternative approaches to traditional supply chain management systems, MES platforms, and OEE software. Rafael has worked with businesses of all sizes worldwide to digitally transform their operations. This episode is made possible by our friends at HiveMQ, who are providers of an enterprise MQTT platform. Welcome to the fourth generation podcast here on Industry40.tv, which is a series of interviews designed to help you learn industrial IoT from some of the world's leading practitioners. So if you're new here, please do subscribe and follow us on all podcast platforms to never miss any of the interviews. My name is Kudzai Manditereza, and here is my interview with Rafael. Hey, Rafael, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. I'm really looking forward to having an interesting conversation with you. So welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here, and I'm also looking forward to this.
Thank you so much. So today I want to talk to you about orchestrating human-machine collaboration for digital transformation in manufacturing, which I think is a really important topic to have at this particular juncture, when a lot of companies are really looking at transforming or undergoing digital transformations to really kind of like remain competitive, right? So maybe to begin, most digital transformation strategies, I think we spoke about this offline, they fail to kind of like put the human element into the picture. They focus mainly on data collection and analytics and stuff like that. Now, based on your experience, what do you see as being the biggest challenges that are brought about by this neglect of the human element?
I think more than challenges, I see a missed opportunity. So a missed opportunity, right? So we are doing these digital transformations, focusing a lot on the machines, especially from an engineer perspective, focus a lot on data for analytics. But then we go back to the factory and we still see operators going around with paper and not a lot of technology supporting the operations. So the plant managers and the operations managers. So this is where I think that there is a gap and a missed opportunity to gain a lot of value from technology.
Okay. Perfect. So, I mean, your company, part of what your company does is on kind of like providing a platform that enable this orchestration of human-to-machine collaboration at the shop floor. So, first of all, maybe can you kind of like, for the benefit of some of the audience, tell us what the orchestration of human-to-machine collaboration ideally looks like, and what are its major benefits?
Absolutely. So Tillit was born on the back of digitizing factories, but with a specific methodology using workflow. So the concept of workflow is not new. It's been around for many years. Some people would call them business process notation, BPMN. But the idea, and you would see a lot of this workflow happening in places like your ERP, your CRM, all the process to get approvals for travel, for you that went to Hanover.
Yep.
So the idea of implementing a digital workflow inside the factory to model and orchestrate every step of the production process, that is where we start to incorporate the human element into that digitalization process, right? By synchronizing the actions of humans and machines, a factory can work like a well-oiled machine where the cogs are running together, right? So instead of having operators around the machine waiting for things to happen and paying attention to the HMI, disconnected from that, the idea is that you bring this engine that monitors what happens around the factory, understand the business rules, and then orchestrates and manage the operators on their activities. So now instead of the operator having to think about every step of the way, that system, that orchestration is telling them, you got to do this now. You got to do this now. Now, this becomes critical when you start to look at the factory, right? When you go in and you understand the business process that the factory has to execute, and you start to recognize that there is a high level of complexity on that business flow. For this product, I have to do this, that. For this customer, there's a different step and different routine. So we ask a lot from the operators to know that, or to go through thick SOP paper documents to make sure they are following process. And as a manager, you lack the visibility of whether such process that was designed in order to produce good product, you lack the visibility whether it was indeed followed. So the output of all that, once you actually go through the hump of bringing the business rules into a system that will orchestrate every step of the way, that system will read signals from the machines so that they can work in synergy.
Yeah.
Once you have that, well, then there's a lot of performance improvement, reduction of lag time, of the idle time, of machine not getting started just because somebody else was doing something else. Reduction of errors, mistakes. How much of wastage is happening just because somebody didn't follow the process? And once you find out on quality control, you need to go back and rework it. So we just demand too much from the operator, right? And one day that they're not feeling well, that they're, have some trouble at home, is that day they make a mistake, and that mistake is expensive. That mistake is very expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned that they may be like the underlying business rules or processes may be complex, and also like they may be processes that kind of like put a burden on the operator. Now, for organizations that may be looking at implementing platforms like to kind of like perform this orchestration of human to machine collaboration, how should they go about assessing and maybe redesigning some of these processes if it's needed at all, to kind of like relook at some of the processes in order to facilitate a digital experience that empowers their workforce to be productive?
Yeah. No, good question. I think for me, I would start kind of understanding a little bit of the context and where the focus is, right? So if we look at technology in companies, and you go into a top layer of the pyramid, the ERP layer, the CRM layer, you will find that companies have evolved a lot in that area, right? So they have strong technology capability around managing their supply chain process, all their accountings, because they had to over time. So even when we talk about digital transformation on that layer, it's just an improvement, it's an increment, because you can't find a company today that doesn't run an ERP and it's not digital, that that side of the story. The other place that there has been a lot of investment is on the bottom layer. So your SCADA system, your PLC. So a lot that we see and we talk about is heavily on the automation layer. So I have really strong SCADA capability to do line controls and to do all the automation that I want. So I feel like that middle between the ERP and the PLC and the SCADA is the bit that we're talking about here, right? So the reality is that when we go into factories, that middle is the bar is low. Okay, the maturity level on that level is pretty low. So the question becomes, how do you start improving that? So how do we redesign your manufacturing process to, fix that gap? And in that is where process becomes a key word for me, So we gotta when we think about machine, we're thinking about that one step that the machine has to do. Maybe this machine has to fill bottles. That's what it does.
Yeah.
When we think about a factory, we got to think about process, because it starts from raw material inbound, gets processed, gets stored, gets work in progress, gets validated, gets dispatched. So there's a process. So the concept should be really around digitizing the process, right? And this is where there's a catch. There's a pitfall here that you might fall in terms of, I'm going to digitize the process. I'm going to digitize all my paper. Let's put everything in Excel or in, Google Forms.
Yeah.
And that is a trap of going into, it will improve, but you're still missing out a lot of opportunities, right? Because now you're going to paper on glass territory. So the dot is digital, but there's no control. You're still relying on somebody to remember to do that. You're still relying, it's not really helping them yet, right? So when we continue, improving that digital process, we go into this notion of a workflow. So because what we want to do is manage the work, right? Yeah. So that's where the opportunity is, right? So how can we empower the operation in order to better manage the execution of the manufacturing process? That's what you need to look at it. And even though sometimes it can be daunting and there's work to be done, because like I said before, the process is complex, I'm not sure if you can afford not to do this, because the fact that it is complex makes it so important for you to have a supporting tool. So you go about understanding your process and start to digitize it. The good thing about how you have the as is and how you can get the to be is that you don't have to start as a big bang and go to a factory and say, please design and draw here right now my whole manufacturing process, because I doubt you find somebody that can do that. I doubt that you go into a factory and say, I know every single step that needs to happen on every single product, every single customer combination, every single variation. Not one person will know. You might have a quality manager that knows their bit, and you have a maintenance person that knows that bit. So there is a way for you to implement these things in a bit by bit fashion, station by station, taking these processes, starting with the critical ones, so that you can oxygenate the project and give back value quick. You want that value back quick so that you can keep on your digital journey, instead of working a year, 2 years for that go live, and so far you haven't seen anything. Nothing's live, nothing is actually adding value until after the go live. So using that idea of the workflow, the digital workflow, and then you turbocharge with real-time integration, right, between your machines, your events. So machine stops, that's an event. A cycle finish, that's an event. And even alarms and everything that happens. So you turbocharge that workflow with that integration and the business, the ERPs and the CRMs. That's where there's a lot of opportunity, right? And then you can then achieve that synergy between the machine and the people, and have everything running smoothly, with hopefully less mistakes and inefficiencies.
Okay, that's really makes a lot of sense. I mean, maybe just to kind of like go on a tangent here a bit on the technical side of it. So talking about like the updating, real-time updating of the process, right, with data from like your machines. Is there any specific manner in which the connectivity or the communication protocol that is responsible for like this event generation and transmission? Is there any specific approach that you think maybe works best to kind of like make sure that that integration works perfectly?
Yeah, I mean, we are talking about a decent amount of data. We are talking about communicating. In my case, we are talking about a cloud system that is doing, everything that we talk about here. So you are communicating with a factory that has, closed firewalls for protection for all the reasons. So there is, if you think about a requirement, it needs to be, outgoing. It needs to be outbound. You can't simply open a port, and start doing web hooks. It doesn't work like that. So MQTT is definitely the currently the best option for this kind of communication, and that's what we use for that kind of two-way communication. So events firing from factory over to the cloud, and things happening in the cloud that the factory needs to be aware of. You can then share that information via common broker, right? Yeah. So the beauty of that broker architecture is that it's just a piece of data that is there for you to subscribe and to read. So from a security perspective, it's probably the best way to communicate the information.
Okay, perfect. Now, in one of your blog posts that I came across, you mentioned the need to understand human efficiency through behavioral analytics, right? Like as an important basis on which to create strategies that influence operational value through like this human to machine collaboration. Can you please elaborate on that?
Yeah, so I think to start talking about, in this context of digital transformation and using tools like workflow, and the first point to make is the fact that we typically don't have this data anywhere. If you go to, I remember talking to a head of BI of a big company and say, okay, do you know what's the workload like for your operators? Do you know whether this department is high on workload and the other is not? Do you have any information about how they are how they're working? And obviously the answer was no, we don't know. We know the output, we know how much we produced, we know how much the machine was on, we might know the energy, but we don't know anything about the people. And then if we think about that from the how important the people is to the operation and even to the bottom line, because it is a decent chunk of your P&L, of your costs, then, well, it's a big black hole that you don't know anything about it, right? So started to capture those simple data points, like the workflow told you to do this, and it took you 20 minutes to react and another 5 minutes to accomplish. It's so rich. And it's not about Big Brother. It's not about, I'm tracking you. No, it's actually about helping you. Because if I find out that there's 5 times more things to be done on this, area of the factory than the other area of the factory, I might be able to, move things around. But unless I have somebody there with a stopwatch or going through 50 pages of documents and signatures and counting how many things each one had to do, you just don't know. So for me, it gives a whole different layer of understanding of, again, your manufacturing process, right? I understand really well my machine. I know the OE, I know when it stops, perfect. I understand my material. I know how much came in or how much came out. I don't know anything about the labor. And you need those three things to produce anything, or unless you're completely autonomous. But yeah.
Oh yeah.
So does it make sense? It's just understanding the execution of the business process, basically, right? That's and because it's being done by people, you end up understanding what people are doing. If you take those data points and mesh it with your machine performance, you might actually find a lot of new things that you didn't know about it. Correlation between shift manager, people, quality issues, and wastage. So there's a lot to be gained there in terms of insights.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes total sense that there would be sort of like correlations, so to speak. So another capability that you highlighted in one of your content pieces, I guess, is being able to identify and resolve value-destroying behaviors on the shop floor. Now, that kind of like got me thinking and curious. First, what does a typical value-destroying behavior look like? And how can manufacturers identify and resolve such behaviors?
Yeah. So I think there's two concepts there, right? So if we think about value destroying, you could go on the tangent of, okay, I have an operator that says it takes 40 minutes to do this changeover, but I've timed it on the system and it takes only 15. So how do we go about that in terms of understanding your plant capacity? Because if you don't have a really good grasp of your plant capacity, most likely you're producing less than you could, right? So there is a little bit of that. There's also a lot around, how do I avoid, value being destroyed by helping them? So in this case, an example is there's so many of these steps. We're producing, 50 products a day. There's so many things happen. Each order is about 200 steps that somebody has to do. The chances of you going to automatically in your brain is really high. So you start doing something, you don't even notice that it's wrong, right? Yeah. So having a system to kind of, as a co-pilot on your shoulder, say, hey, listen, you just told me that the shelf life of this product is this date, but it's not. It's supposed to be that date. That simple little thing just saved you from bagging, 3 pallets worth of bread on the wrong label that you would have to kind of unbag and rebag it again. Imagine the waste of time and effort. So I think the what I'm trying to think about is there's on one side understanding of what happened, but sometimes even more important is blocking errors from happening.
Yes.
So I think this is where we have to understand that value destroying concept, like how do we avoid things from not going as planned, and also how we identify things that potentially is not going as planned.
Oh, okay, interesting. And I think this kind of like ties in nicely with what I want to talk about to you next, like, because typically in the shop floor, you'd have like employees who are really good at kind of like really minimizing such value destroying behaviors, like people who really kind of like understand the machines, what we would call tribal knowledge, right? And unfortunately, such people would have to eventually leave the company, right? And this kind of like really creates a gap. And one of the benefits of implementing systems that kind of like orchestrate this human to machine collaboration is that ability to bring or to facilitate knowledge retention. Now, how much of an impact, as far as you are concerned, do you think knowledge retention has on digital transformation strategies?
Well, I think COVID has really shaken things up big time for factories. The amount of people I talked to that had to stop, like not run a shift because they didn't have people. Um, and even back out of COVID, there's a lot of people that left, changed careers. So I think knowledge is crucial to the operation. And what sometimes we don't recognize is that for some of these industries, some of these factories, to be able to run the machine solo, right? So I'm operator of this area. I've done all my training. I know the machine. I know everything, what to do each time. Some places will take you about 5 years to 7 years to become solo. So that knowledge, tribal knowledge you're talking about, is a lot of that 5 years of experience of just being there and knowing what to do when something goes wrong and knowing all the steps on all the variants of the operation. So if we're able to kind of extract some of the knowledge, you won't get everything, but if you're able to extract some of the knowledge, and then instead of putting in, 50-page Word document SOPs that gets hidden somewhere collecting dust, and you put it in the system and don't put it as a documentation, put it as a co-pilot. Not somebody having to read, oh, now I know what to do each step of the way. No, tell them what to do now. And then if the product has this characteristic, they will do this thing now. So it's a co-pilot, right? Giving you directions, right? So I'm kind of saying, well, try to drive nowadays without, Google Maps. So this system becomes your Google Maps, giving you directions. So if you're able to do this, then you're mitigating problems, when unfortunately those people leave. It could be because of COVID, it could be because of retirement. I still remember me walking on a factory in the United States, and the plant manager was actually very proud because he was introducing me to all operators, and all of them had at least 25 years of factory. Oh, wow. And it was great to see, because he was trying to promote retention. But at the same time, somewhere along the lines, and this was probably 15 years ago, you start to think about retirement, right? So again, those people will retire, and unfortunately, they will leave with that knowledge. So I think treasuring that knowledge and understanding that that's part of the company's IP. It's, if you're not doing that, like, good luck, I think. So the other thing about once you start to bring that knowledge into business rules that runs the system, you start to understand the difference between the people. Like you said, like you mentioned, there's an operator that maybe runs really well, that's been there for a while, and maybe he didn't leave, but maybe the night shift guy, it's not that great, right? Because he's maybe new, or so then you start to be able to kind of put side by side and understand and help the ones that are poorly performing, bringing the good ideas, to the other side. So that's it is as important, standardization of your process. I think it's very key. And then finally, if you are indeed standardizing the process, you want to make sure that it is being followed. And I think one of the most difficult thing to do around managing a process that runs around, printing forms in sheets of paper where somebody just does a check, is that you're not really sure whether that person did, how they should have done. So maybe you have to do, this is a good example. We had a business process of doing a check. I think it was every 20 minutes, right? And we went from paper to digital. So we put in the system, say, well, send a check every 20 minutes. And then after a few weeks, they realized that 90% of the checks weren't getting, done. It was the checks gets expired, so you can't do it if you're not doing it on a timely fashion. And then, we didn't know it was a problem with the system. So managers goes and walks the factory and realized that it was humanly impossible to do every 20 minutes, because you had to do this, and then you have to go there and do that, and you have to go there to do that. And then you look back and all those years of paper, and somebody said, well, we never had this issue. The forms were all filled up perfectly. So reality is that you were lying to yourself. You weren't really following the business process that's there to ensure high quality product. So I think it's all that combination of defining the business rule and then adhering to the business rule. So it's a cycle there.
Awesome. Yeah, so I think you kind of like mentioned that systems that enable the orchestration of human to machine collaboration kind of like sit in the middle between your ERPs and then your production flow at the bottom. Now, the danger or the confusion, as I've experienced, is that systems in that level kind of like all get slapped with the label MES, right? Even though they've got like a wide range of functionalities that they could be performing there, which really kind of like makes it difficult for a manufacturer, because they think that if they kind of like pick up anything that is called MES, it will do the same thing that the next platform does. So my question to you is, what would you say are the factors to consider when choosing a technology platform for effective orchestration of human to machine collaboration?
I think it's funny that you said MES first.
Yeah.
MES has taken a little bit of a bad word for a few reasons. And I think one of the reasons is because there has been a lot of failed implementations, very expensive implementations. So I think that sometimes I consider what we do MES, and sometimes we try to fall into a different thing that we called a digital manufacturing operations. So the term there is really a focus on the operations first, and the idea of being digital. So instead of you starting with the typical things that the MES would solve, you start with that concept that I keep repeating with the process flow, right? So, and the MES would do, they have their own ways of doing, very prescriptive, very there's a lot of standards that talks about how MES should work and so on. So that is fine, but I like to remind ourselves on the focus on the process, the steps. So if somebody has to do a clean, do it. If somebody has to do a safety check, do it. Is that MES? I don't know, but it's the it's the process, it's the manufacturing process, the operator.
Yep.
So instead of you thinking about, okay, what does the MES can do, and let's put that in, let's think about what the operator has to do to produce goods, and let's model over those things, those tasks. You do end up, either integrating to an MES that will be doing, those sections, the sections that they decide to implement, or we may do some of those things. We can do track and trace, for instance. Track and trace is just about recording consumptions and production. So let's record consumption and productions. We can do OE. OE is another one of those, the performance element of MES. Again, you just calculate get the run rates, get the shifts, get everything. But the cool thing is that if you do OE from a concept of a workflow, you realize that, oh, I need to tell the system, the OE system, that I have a shift. Oh, great. So now I have a shift start event. And I know that the business process has a lot of steps when they start a shift. So let's tap into the workflow of this shift start process. Oh, I got a stoppage. Let's do a stoppage reason. Great. I have a task list with all the quality checks, all the maintenance checks, all the safety checks. Let's just add the stoppage reason there. So then we don't have to go somewhere else. So I think that the different approach here is you take a connected frontline worker first approach, which is, like think about the operator as a person that needs supporting. And then you start to bring in the MES components, because you'll find that they slot in way easier than having to train the operator to click, 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 so that they can consume a pallet. So it's a little bit of a mind shift there in terms of a workflow, task-based driven, and everything becomes around that. Yeah. So the operator tends to see a lot of benefit there, because they don't have to think too much. They just do what the system is telling them to do. The manager sees a lot of benefit there, because now they're paying attention to the process execution and making sure that is adherent to what it should be. And then the data analyst can still get a ton of data out of the system to do analysis and reporting. Last one is auditors. They love it because everything's already digital. You don't have to go through handwritten notes. So I see all those benefits around when you go into this digital manufacturing operations approach. Now, in terms of technology, I think that the other way I like to picture these things is that, and it's a bit generic here, but a lot of the times I've seen MES being implemented was to solve really complicated problems, right? Which is great. Sometimes you have really complicated problems and you need to solve them. But a lot of the times we leave simple problems to be solved that has, great value. That means good bang for buck, not solved. So I think that if I'm bringing a technology, I want the technology to not necessarily need to be a bazooka to solve my super complicated problem, but maybe a technology that can be used by the business to model and manage their operation, right? So the technology we do is usually involves a small project to get connected machines, about 3, 4, 5 tags per machine. You do that baseline. Okay, I'm connected. I have data. We set up a few, example workflows to show, okay, here's what a pre-start check looks like. Every factory does a pre-start check. Before you start an order, you do a pre-start check. There's probably a form somewhere that says pre-start check or pre-op check.
Yep.
Take that and you digitize it. Great. Now the operators are following the process. Now I have order duration, order quantity, order progress, all the order management component of the OE, it's there, of the MES is there. Great. But now I give that tool to a continuous improvement manager, and that person will start to digitize every step of the way. And so they need a tool that is easy to do that. So that's no code, low code, because that 90% of the step, it's not technically difficult to do, It's just a form that has 3 questions. But the fact that you ask the form of 3 questions at the right time, and you got commitment, and you got accountability, that goes a long way. That makes a lot of difference. So again, from the technology perspective, be able to do the hard bits, but be easy to do the easy bits. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Super interesting. So now, one of the sort of like architectural approaches that have been gaining quite some attention is the unified namespace. So what I'm curious to find out is maybe using Tillit as an example, how leveraging unified namespace for the orchestration of human-to-machine collaboration looks like for you.
Yeah. No, UNS is a great philosophy, I think. I'm not sure if the philosophy, but the reality is that if I were to approach a customer that has gone through an UNS implementation, I would be in heaven. All right.
Yep.
Because if I have one technical challenge, I have two technical challenges during implementation. One is not challenge, but things we have to do. One is connect to the machines, and the other one is connect to the ERP. If I come into a factory that has already organized all the tag systems, I don't have to think about what PLC, what SCADA, what protocol, and it's all in MQTT, which I'm already said that I'm a fan of. Great, you just saved me, a couple of weeks where we would have to go after the tags that we need. We don't need that many tags. We're not a historian. We're not that hungry for data from the PLC. It's quite amazing how little we need to run a full factory. But it's really nice to have them organized, and I don't have to, have that challenge. And the other thing from an UNS perspective is that I believe we have a lot of, good data that can be fed back to the UNS. So because it is a pub sub, it is an event-based architecture. The way this works is we in Tillit, we're subscribing to that UNS to cherry pick the things that we need. And we're pushing back to the UNS, the events, the things that happen. So for instance, shift managers just hit the pre-start check, completion. I want that to feed into the HMI. So then only after the pre-start check is done, I should be able to, start the machine. So that flow of data is actually really powerful. And when you start thinking about that event-based system where you're literally, receiving things that will drive the workflow will then drive information back to you, and you work on that event communication. So it fits perfect.
Cool.
The only thing to kind of think about is that because we are not that data hungry, like I said, it's only you don't need that much on asset status and counts. That's pretty much it. I wouldn't necessarily put it as a prerequisite though. I think that nobody's building US so they can have Tillit.
Yeah.
They're building UNS for a much bigger purpose. So it's fine if they are doing that project in parallel. And then once that is available, you just, turn the tap to a different direction. So that's all.
Awesome. Makes a lot of sense. Now, once companies have implemented digital manufacturing systems, as you have described, I would imagine that they would want to measure and evaluate the success of such an exercise. So in that regard, what would you say are the most important metrics and maybe monitoring strategies to use in this scenario?
Yeah, I think that if you go back to what we're talking about is we're transcribing the business logic, the business rules, how I run an operation into a digital system. So as a successful criteria, I need to make sure that, what's the percentage of that business rule was able to be transcribed into the system. One way to know that is by monitoring how many manual tasks that a user is triggering. So the system will issue tasks. So it's a proactive approach to operators say, you receive your task, you do it. But sometimes we fail to contextualize that task against an event, either from machine or from process, right? Yeah. So that means that you got to go to the operator and say, hey, when this happens, you got to press this manual start button and you start this activity, okay? Okay. So normally, statistically speaking, from our customers, we run about 99% of the tasks that are submitted by a user, and there's thousands and thousands per day per client. 99% of those are automatically triggered by the system. So from a success criteria, I would actually be happy with 90%. If 90% of my business process was automated and orchestrated, I'm pretty happy with it. 10% exception. The second one to monitor is the adherence to those tasks, right? So the system issue task, but if you didn't do it, you skipped or you expired. So that's the second one so now you're trying to measure, okay, is my operator doing what they were meant to do, right? Because the system is dictating what should be done.
Yeah.
And then we can track that too. So dashboards to track, okay, how many tasks expired? Why did it expire? Is there a reason for that? And this helps us not only understand the success factor, but also monitor the factory, because it might change. It might start getting more expiration, and you realize that they're getting expired because they can't keep up. We're ramping up production, and I have to do, like I said before, every 20 minutes I got to do this, but I also got to do that because I'm backfilling for another operator. So now I'm running 2 machines at the same time. If I can't keep up, the task will expire, but now I know.
Yep.
So you see how it loops around.
Exactly.
So for me, this is a very simple, very, out of the tool, easy to notice. And then you as a plant manager, operations director, you can know, okay, what's the percentage? How much my factory is process automated. I'm not saying physical automation. I'm saying, like you've automated the logic, the engine. And it's pretty cool to see in real life.
Absolutely. So what's interesting for me is point number 2, like the adherence aspect of it. And so what I would like to kind of like take your thoughts on is how much of the lack of adherence do you think can be attributed to lack of effective training programs that plant managers need to put in place? Because I mean, it's a for an operator who's used to performing tasks in a certain way for like 5 to 10 years, for them to change overnight, I think there has to be some form of training. So maybe the question is, how can plant managers develop and deliver some effective training programs to prepare their workforce for successful implementation of these systems?
I think there are 2 moments there. I think it's a very interesting question because there are 2 moments there. The first moment is during implementation, the initial moment. So like I said, the technical challenge, connecting to machines, connecting to ERPs, it's actually pretty quick, right? The tools today that allows us to do that makes the job, a couple of weeks worth of work. So the technology is not the challenge. I don't need to bring in a robust software developer, team person to the implementation project. You don't have to. If the technology is not a problem, what is the problem? Change management. Change management is not easy. People don't like to change, even if it's for the better. People don't like to change. They're too busy to change. They're too busy to stop to even pay attention to what you have to do. So bringing people early in the journey and explaining why are we doing this? We're not doing this to control you. We're not doing this. We're trying to make a better environment to work, right?
Yeah.
Once you have that chance, and you need 2 chances. One is the chance to kind of show the application and say, listen, it's just these 3 buttons. Yeah, easy. So that person that you thought would have a massive change management issue, I remember I went to a depelletizer operator, and everybody thought that he would be, super against it because, and I showed him the tool and said, listen, you just click here, click here, click here. And he said, well, great. I've been asking for management for years for something like this.
Yeah.
So we need to show them that it's not that hard. That's number 1. And the second one, you need to show them when it helps you. So that example that I gave you with the best before date on a bread, that's a real example. And after that day, the operators change management was gone because, they saw that as a way not to make mistakes. And nobody likes to make mistakes. Nobody likes to make mistakes. because they're the one, unpacking product, and they don't feel good about it, right? So that's kind of a couple of things to consider in the beginning. So definitely pay attention to training and to change management. Now, what's interesting is that after a while, they go through the hump, and in the beginning of the project, everybody's like really paying attention to things, and so there's a lot of focus there. There's a moment where it stabilizes and it becomes part of the day-to-day, and then you start seeing mistakes. But the thing is that you can find a mistake now.
Yeah.
You can go back to the digital workflow, and you can improve the digital workflow either by changing the process or by just adding text to explain. There are tasks they have to do every once in a while. It's not on a special occasion. I don't remember how to do this. Okay, now you have a chance to put that, tribal knowledge, document it, take pictures, put it there. So that's the connected frontline worker part of Tillit, is bringing that notion of, listen, knowledge, documentation, contextualize at the right moment in time. It's a super powerful tool. And how do you use that tool? Well, you try it as much as possible in the beginning of the project, but you run out of time. But if you have that continuous improvement person that can actually do the change in the system, they will start noticing mistakes and say, hey, if I put this comment here in the front of the operator, that mistake won't happen again, because now they are in structure how to do that. So the training becomes something kind of, ongoing, especially considering that you have new people. People move inside the factory. Today I'm a filler operator. Tomorrow I'm a palletizer. Or today I'm in this CNC or that CNC. So you need to keep that momentum of training, and the tool becomes a digital SOP. You don't even need manuals. The tool is telling you what to do, but you might need to add a little bit of a snippet to say, listen, remember to check this. You know what I mean?
Yep, absolutely. Interesting. So maybe to kind of try and bring it home for our audience here, do you perhaps have any case studies that you could share where the implementation of a system for orchestrating human-to-machine collaboration positively influenced shop floor productivity?
Yeah, I think one of the cases that I like a lot is the one that we digitize all the workflow, and then the company started to use the data, right? So that data, that the behavior data you talk about, and the first one was noting that there was one station twice as much work as the other station, and they realized that there wasn't really a reason for that. It was just how it has always been.
Yeah.
Like I said before, once you have like 50-page worth of paper sheets, it's really hard to make conclusions out of it. But if I give you a pivot table and you see this number being twice as much as this number, so you can easily say why. The interesting thing is that just by changing configuration, you move those tasks to another station, and you start to stabilize it,
Yeah.
So seeing that company use the data to change the business process was really, really interesting, and there's more examples of that change, or how once you have the power of managing the workflow, you start to improve it, you start to change it, you start to move things around. And then you start to realize that there are things that we do that are not smart. And it's been there for 20 years because maybe something happened 20 years ago and somebody decided to put a form there and nobody questioned it. It's just part of the process. So one of the factory work, I remember the manager saying that one of the rules of everything going into the workflow was, give me a reason. Do you need this for auditing? Is this adding value? So you start to challenge your own design process, right? And it's really hard to do that using paper. And it's also Hard to do that in the whiteboard because the thing is so complicated that you can't draw in the whiteboard. It's that complicated. So the case studies that we have been working with, the approach that we've been taking is a little bit of a counterintuitive, because we were taught to do blueprints and design and then build. A lot of the times we do as is into the system, because it's only after it's in the system executing, which by the way helps in change management because there's no disruption to the existing process. But it gives you the visibility to say, why are you doing this every shift? It takes you 2 hours to do this task. And you say you're doing every shift. And I look at the paper, yeah, I can see every shift there's a form. But if it takes 2 hours, you haven't been doing it. So when have you been doing this? So as a plant manager, imagine the power to know what's going on, because remember, you're in the office, right? Maybe you have a window, but you're not in the floor 24/7.
Yeah.
So a lot of the times you don't know what's going on. But now you have two superpower. One is understanding what's going on, and two is influencing what happened, right?
Yeah.
So without influencing, like, what can you do? Your OE is 40%, but without any influence, you can't change it. Like, it doesn't change by alone. It doesn't change alone. That was what I'm saying. So I think that these case studies were, for me, the most satisfying side of it is that it's not that case study where they contracted 6 months worth of a data science together with a soft engineer to build a robot. It's not that. It's actually the quality manager, which honestly doesn't know a lot of technology, was able to learn how to model a business process into the system, and was able to tweak that model in order to make sure that things are checked where it's get checked. Yeah. So a lot, for me, the best thing about those case studies is that they're quick for value. I have a customer that was live in 6 weeks with scheduler, OE, quality, SOPs, and they had somebody taking care of the SOPs, writing them. They had another person doing the scheduler. They had there was just a couple of software guys to do the integration with the ERPs and passing REST APIs back and forth. But the speed that they were able to deliver value was amazing. And then they went through the phase of project. They deliver a core capability. The CI came in. They continue adding more processes to the workflow so that all those soft processes were mapped. And now they start to do, analytics around the data, right? So we read the data and we build dashboards, we build, visualizations, and it's beautiful to see.
Awesome. Yeah, so maybe now to kind of like close things off, maybe let's take a step back and talk about Tillit, especially for those who are not familiar with the company and the product and services. Can you please explain what is Tillit, what are your products and services, and tell us more about Tillit, the company?
So Tillit is a software as a service. So we're a cloud-based software as a service. What we do is basically what I've been talking about, explaining in conceptual terms, is what we do in practice. So we have a set of features. It is cloud hosted, so you just sign up, get an account. We have edge integration so that we can connect to SCADA machines, OPC UA, read data, send it to Tillit. And we have a manufacturing specific workflow engine. So this allows us to, do what I was talking about, digitizing a factory, modeling the business process, creating quality management systems, creating even maintenance scenarios, and some of the MES capability, including track and trace, OE, inventory management, and all the bits and pieces. We do all that with as little code as possible. So it is a low code, no code platform, which means that for those forms that are simple, they can stay simple. And then for those forms that we wanted to make it a little bit more complicated, we can add, logic, code, and so on. And we're event driven, which means that things gets really interesting when we start to think about your business processes around events between systems, right? So ERP to Tillit, Tillit to ERP, SCADA to Tillit, Tillit to SCADA. So that is the turbocharge of your manufacturing specific digital workflow. That's what we do.
Okay. Yeah, so that brings us to the end of this session. Rafael, thank you so much again for taking the time to come out onto the show and share your valuable insights with the audience. Thank you.
No, thank you. It was a pleasure.